Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. Hugging the wrong boyfriend, can you come downstairs? By the time Jason Zhou's message arrived, it was already past 10 at night. Summer Yu was lying on her bed watching a movie. When she saw the message, she sat upright with her phone in hand, the corner of her lips lifting into a surprised smile. As she got out of bed, she sent him a voice message. Are you downstairs? Didn't you say your professor gave you a lot of work today? A reply quickly came from the other side. Finished it. I brought something for you. Earlier that afternoon, Summer had told Jason that she wanted to eat tiramisu and croissants from the dessert shop near T University. That bakery was especially famous for its croissants, far better than those sold in chain stores. The only problem was that the shop was too far from her home, and they didn't offer delivery. If you wanted to eat it, you had to go buy it yourself. Normally she was very busy. Aside from occasionally going to see Jason, she would never travel that far just for food. Jason Zhou was a graduate student at T University who had just finished his program this summer. From time to time he would come to visit her. Since he said he had brought something for her, Summer naturally assumed he had brought the desserts. I'll come down right away. After sending the voice message, Summer tossed her phone aside and walked around the room, but she couldn't find her glasses anywhere. Her eyesight was about -4 diopters. When she went out, she usually wore contact lenses. At home, she wore her framed glasses. But now she had no idea where she had left them. Afraid that Jason might be waiting too long, she quickly put on a coat, grabbed her phone, and hurried downstairs. It had rained all afternoon, and the temperature had dropped several degrees. There wasn't the slightest hint of spring in the air. As Summer stepped out of the hallway, she pulled her collar tighter against the cold wind. She walked to the roadside, squinting as she looked around. Soon she spotted a tall, slender figure standing beside the flower bed. Without her glasses, everything looked blurry. The man was talking on the phone. He turned slightly and casually walked 2 steps forward. The dim streetlight fell over him, outlining his figure. His facial features were still indistinct, but she could clearly see the white coat he was wearing. That coat was the birthday gift she had bought for Jason Zhou. She had ordered it online and had it delivered directly to T University. Just a few days ago, he had even worn it specially to show her. Nice. Very nice. Summer rushed forward and hugged him happily. Why are you here? The man's body was surrounded by a chill in the night air. She didn't notice that he had suddenly stiffened. She lifted her face and smiled, trying to surprise. The rest of her words caught in her throat. Her smile instantly froze. Her eyes widened as she stared at the unfamiliar yet handsome face before her, her entire body going stiff. The man was still holding his phone. When he lowered his head and saw her face clearly, he frowned. For a brief moment, his gaze looked slightly dazed. But soon his brows knitted deeper, the confusion in his eyes fading and being replaced by sharp clarity. It was obvious that he was quite annoyed by her sudden hug. Oh no, wrong person. I'm sorry. I mistook you for someone else. Coming back to her senses, Summer felt as if she had been burned. She jumped away from him and retreated 3 steps in quick succession, stammering her apology. Hopefully the man in front of her wouldn't think she was some kind of shameless flirt. Adrian Liu looked at the girl in front of him and suddenly felt like laughing. Clearly he was the one who had just been taken advantage of, yet her face was full of caution and defense. The person on the other end of the phone had no idea what was happening and was still asking. What's going on? Why did I hear a girl's voice? It sounded like she was in your arms. Don't tell me you've got a girlfriend now? Well, that statement wasn't exactly wrong. She really had been in his arms, just by accident. Summer stood there awkwardly, waiting for him to say something. Adrian Liu gave a soft laugh and waved a hand at her, then spoke into the phone in a low voice. It's nothing. This was so embarrassing. Summer's face turned red. After another hurried apology, she lowered her head and ran off as fast as she could. On the phone, the other person was still unconvinced. I don't believe you. That voice definitely came from right next to you. No. Just a misunderstanding. Adrian Liu said casually. His voice was extremely pleasant, deep and magnetic, perfectly matching his handsome face. Summer slowed her steps and couldn't help secretly turning back to look. In her mind, she replayed the feeling of that hug just now. Something about it had seemed different. His chest had been firmer and broader than Jason's, and his height seemed a bit taller too, maybe 2 or 3 centimeters taller than Jason, at least 1.87 meters. Well, his appearance and aura were also better than Jason's. Sensing that he might turn around, Summer quickly turned her head back. The moment she faced forward again, she saw a tall figure standing at the corner of the street. After the embarrassing mistake earlier, Summer didn't dare rush forward recklessly this time. Only when the person waved at her and called out, "Summer." Did she relax? It really was her boyfriend. Summer finally let out a breath of relief and walked over quickly. Jason Zhou was holding a paper bag in his hand. Summer had been about to complain to him about the embarrassing moment when she hugged the wrong person, but when her eyes fell on the bag in his hand, she suddenly froze. Looking up, she asked, "The coat doesn't fit?" "That shouldn't be the case. You already have another coat from this brand, and it's also this size." Jason Zhou looked a little awkward. His tone was unnatural. "It fits very well." "Then why did you bring it here?" Was he showing it to her like it was an interview piece? Wouldn't it make more sense to simply wear it and come see her? Jason Zhou stayed silent. Summer felt something was strange. She glanced at his hand again. He was holding only that one bag. A faint disappointment appeared on her face. "I thought you came to bring me cake." Originally he had intended to bring the cake, but Jason Zhou stopped after that word and didn't continue. Summer blinked. They ran out? Jason Zhou paused, then nodded. Once again, silence fell between them. The atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. Summer stared at him, feeling that he was acting very oddly tonight. His expression looked hesitant, as if he had something he couldn't say. A light drizzle began to fall from the sky. Under the yellow streetlights, the raindrops glittered softly. It seemed that Jason Zhou had finally found the right moment. "This coat. It's too expensive. You work very hard. There's no need to buy me such an expensive gift. The tag is still on it, and the return period hasn't expired yet. You should return it." After saying that, Jason Zhou handed the bag to her. "It's raining again. You should go home. I'll call you after I get back." Jason Zhou wasn't a bad person. In the past, he had spent quite a lot of money on her birthdays. Because she was a year older than him and already working, she never wanted him to feel disadvantaged as the younger one. That was why she had splurged on this coat. A birthday gift had already been given. How could it possibly be returned? Jason Zhou should understand such a simple principle. Sometimes, a woman's sixth sense was truly frighteningly accurate. A sudden guess flashed through Summer Yu's mind. She didn't take the bag. Instead, she raised her head and stared at him. "You're acting very strange today." The drizzle fell onto her face, carrying a faint chill. She reached up and pulled her collar tighter. "If there's something you want to say, say it directly. Don't wait until you're home and tell me over the phone. Let's make it clear right now before you leave. Stop hiding things and beating around the bush. Jason Joe didn't dare look her in the eye. After a long moment, he finally spoke in a low voice. Let's break up. I didn't want to deceive you. I got back together with my first love. That's why I can't accept this coat. Summer, you had never imagined that one day she would be cheated on. Why did breakups always happen on rainy days? Was it just to make the atmosphere even more miserable? Summer pulled the hood of her coat over her head. Lowering her head, she hugged the bag tightly and walked back through the rain. The moment she reached the entrance of her building, a gust of cold wind hit her and she sneezed loudly. Sniffling, the more she thought about it, the more wrong she felt. She even regretted what had just happened. Instead of simply throwing the bag at Jason Joe's face, she should have slapped him as well. After pressing the elevator button, she heard footsteps behind her. Instinctively, she turned around. The moment she saw the person's face clearly, she froze in surprise. Their eyes met. Adrian Liu looked completely calm. Just a few minutes earlier, he had been standing beside the main gate smoking. Because the entrance steps were slightly elevated, and thanks to his height, he had happened to see her standing with a young man at the intersection not far away. That young man was probably the reason she had hugged the wrong person earlier. Curious, Adrian had watched for a while longer. That must have been her boyfriend. So why didn't she hug him? Slowly exhaling a stream of smoke, Adrian lowered his head to look at his phone. When he looked up again, he saw her suddenly throw the bag hard into the young man's face before storming off while clutching it. They had argued. Just a moment ago she had happily hugged him. Could it be that her boyfriend had seen her hugging the wrong man and they had started fighting because of that? After making that guess, Adrian curled his lips in a faint, self-mocking smile. What did it have to do with him? How boring. Summer lowered her head and walked past him. Only when she had already stepped into the building did Adrian extinguish the cigarette in his hand. The elevator arrived. Summer blinked, then turned around and hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. Adrian Liu followed and stood beside her. The elevator doors slowly closed. An inexplicable sense of pressure filled the narrow space. Summer felt a little uncomfortable, but at the same time she became more alert, especially when the man beside her raised his hand and pressed the button for the 12th floor. Then he politely turned his head and asked, "Which floor?" His voice was still dangerously pleasant. Summer felt goosebumps rise along her arms. In just a few seconds, countless guesses flashed through her mind. Why was he here? And why was he following her into the elevator? Could he be some kind of stalker? Was it possible that just because she hugged him earlier, she had somehow become his target? Holding her breath, she lifted her eyes to look into his deep gaze. Then she hesitated. But judging from his appearance and bearing, he didn't look like a pervert at all. The elevator began to move. Summer tightly gripped her phone and tried to sound calm. "I live on the 12th floor too." She raised her head and looked directly at him, probing carefully. "And you? Who are you here to see?" "I've lived here for over a year, but I've never seen you before." Her parents had divorced long ago. Both of them had remarried and had children with their new families. After she grew up, she no longer wanted to visit their homes. Whenever she went there, she always felt like an outsider. After graduating and starting work, both of her parents had given her some money to buy this apartment. It was an old, small place with 2 bedrooms and 1 living room. The renovation alone had taken 3 months. She had moved in last October. Up until now, it had only been about half a year, but she deliberately exaggerated the time she had lived there. There were 3 households on each floor. Ever since she moved in, the apartment directly across from hers had always been empty. The other apartment on the floor belonged to an elderly couple. Their children occasionally came to visit, and she had met them several times. She was certain that this was the first time she had ever seen this man. With his appearance and presence, if she had met him before, she definitely wouldn't have forgotten. Adrian Liu slipped one hand into his pocket while holding a bag in the other. Looking down at her, he said casually, "I moved in today. Apartment 1201. That meant he lived right across from her." Adrian Liu clearly noticed the wariness in her expression. A faint scoff escaped from his nose. "I'm a law-abiding citizen. There's no need to be afraid." Was her suspicion really that obvious? Summer lowered her head awkwardly, staring at their reflections on the elevator door. "I'm not afraid," she said reluctantly. "I was just a little curious." At that moment, the elevator reached the 12th floor. The doors opened. Summer took a deep breath and stepped outside. To be honest, Summer Yu was still a little worried. A girl living alone had to be cautious. Just because someone was handsome didn't mean he was necessarily a good person. She deliberately slowed her pace so she wouldn't walk side by side with him. But Adrian Liu had long legs. After just a few steps, he was already ahead of her. He stopped in front of apartment 1201. After pressing his fingerprint, the door automatically unlocked. Only then did Summer finally breathe a sigh of relief. Standing in front of her own door, she was about to say something like "Welcome to the neighborhood." But before she could speak, the man suddenly turned his head and looked at her. A faint smile curved on his lips. "It's good for a girl to have some sense of caution. Now you can relax. I really do live here." This small encounter with her new neighbor unexpectedly eased the terrible mood Summer had been in after being cheated on by her ex-boyfriend. Unfortunately, it seemed her cold was getting worse. After blocking Jason Zhou's number and deleting every photo related to him, she buried herself under the blanket and called Daisy Tang. Daisy Tang had been her high school classmate and was also her closest friend. Daisy's college entrance exam score hadn't been good enough the first time, so she had repeated a year before finally getting into T University. Jason Zhou had come to T University as a graduate student from another university. Because Daisy and Jason were in the same major, they had been assigned to the same supervising professor. Summer had met Jason largely because of Daisy. Damn that coward. The moment Daisy heard that Jason Zhou had gotten back together with his ex and cheated on her best friend, she started cursing furiously. His reputation at school was so good. Was that all just an act? Getting back together with his ex first and only then telling you? Back then I even praised him for being younger but handsome and reliable. Turns out I'm terrible at judging people. I was the one who set you two up in the first place. Indeed, it had been Daisy who had introduced Summer Yu and Jason Zhou to each other. Knowing Daisy felt guilty, Summer comforted her. Forget it. We hadn't even been dating that long. I didn't really lose anything. It's just disgusting. Let me think of a way to deal with him. Daisy said angrily. Forget it, Summer replied. I don't want to make things complicated. At least he returned the birthday gift. I should thank him for that. As long as you're over it, Daisy sighed. Then she suddenly asked, why does your voice sound hoarse? Don't tell me you've been crying alone. It's not that, Summer said. I just caught a cold. Daisy finally relaxed. That's good then. Tomorrow's Saturday and I have something to do. I'll come see you on Sunday and we'll go out to eat. After hanging up the phone with Daisy, Summer got up to take some cold medicine. Recently she had been extremely exhausted from working on a comic series. She often stayed up all night and slept during the day. Afraid she might work herself to death, she had decided to use the holiday to adjust her schedule. She forced herself to go to bed early and wake up early, and to eat 3 proper meals every day. She even scheduled breakfast deliveries at exactly 8 o'clock every morning. After placing tomorrow's breakfast order, she tossed her phone aside and fell asleep in a dizzy haze. The next morning, when Adrian Liu was heading out, he happened to see a delivery boy hanging a bag of food on the door handle of the apartment across the hall. His company currently had a project in its final stage, and the entire team was working overtime this weekend. Around 3 in the afternoon, Adrian returned home to retrieve a document he had forgotten. When he reached the door, he suddenly stopped, his gaze fixed on the door handle across the hall. The takeout bag the delivery boy had hung there in the morning was still untouched. Had she forgotten it? Or had something happened? He recalled how the girl had smiled the night before. Her eyes curved as she said, "New neighbor, please take care of me." Well, reminding her about the food could be considered a neighborly gesture. Adrian turned around and raised his hand to knock on the door. No response. Frowning, he knocked harder. Still nothing. Had she overslept? Or had she gone out and forgotten about it? Forget it. What did it have to do with him? Adrian Liu turned away while thinking that, after retrieving the document, he stepped outside again. Inevitably, his eyes drifted toward the takeout bag hanging on the door handle. Suddenly, several social news headlines flashed through his mind. Keywords like, living alone, sudden illness, unexpected death. His brows knitted together. He walked back to her door and knocked again. Still no response. After thinking for a moment, he called the building management. Inside the apartment, Summer Yu was burning with a high fever. She had earplugs in and was sleeping in a hazy state. Her phone was set to silent mode, so even though it rang several times, she never heard it. When she finally opened her eyes drowsily and removed the earplugs, the noisy sounds outside the door suddenly flooded her ears. No one answered the phone. And knocking didn't get any response either. Miss Yu doesn't have a car. She usually takes the bus or subway to work. Today the security guard didn't see her leave the complex. "Officer, should we just break the door open? What if something really happened?" Break the door? Break whose door? This is someone's home. Summer jolted upright in bed. Her sudden movement made her head spin violently, and she collapsed backward again. Even before catching her breath, she forced herself to sit up. Grabbing the coat hanging on the chair, she put it on and staggered toward the door. She was afraid that if she were even a second slower, her door would really be broken down. She pulled the door open. With messy hair and a pale, sickly face, she stared blankly at the crowd outside. It had never been this lively outside her apartment before. 3 people standing in front were wearing police uniforms. Next to them were several security guards from the residential complex, along with members of the property management staff, all in uniform. Only the man standing behind them was dressed in casual clothes. His outfit wasn't particularly stylish, but on him it looked like it belonged on a professional clothing model, and he was very handsome. Standing at the very back of the crowd, he looked like a crane among chickens. It was impossible for Summer not to notice him, even though the situation in front of her was extremely embarrassing and chaotic. Her feverish mind still wandered at the worst possible moment. Her new neighbor really was handsome. But wasn't he a little too nosy? And what kind of habit was this? Standing outside someone else's door just to watch the commotion? Sure enough, Chinese people really loved to watch the excitement and gossip. Even a handsome man with a cold, abstinent-looking face was no exception. "Oh my goodness, Miss Yu. It's such a relief that you're okay." When the property management staff saw her standing alive behind the door, they finally let out a long breath of relief. But there was also a hint of complaint in their tone. "We called you so many times. Why didn't you answer the phone? We thought something had happened to you." "Summer, you felt extremely embarrassed. I just caught a cold and had a fever. I wasn't feeling well, so I kept sleeping." Seeing the expressions of relief and helplessness on everyone's faces, especially when her eyes met the police officer's gazes, she couldn't help shivering. "Officer, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I absolutely don't do anything bad." For the past 20 minutes, everyone outside the door had been anxious, as if their hearts were on fire. Meanwhile, the person involved stood there looking innocent and completely unaware. Adrian Liu watched the scene that he himself had unintentionally caused and felt a headache coming on. Leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, he looked at her expressionlessly. As long as she was still alive, that was enough. What a ridiculous situation. The property management staff quickly explained. "Here's what happened. This morning, before Mr. Liu went out, he saw the delivery person hang food on your door handle. When he came back this afternoon, the food was still hanging there. He wanted to remind you, but no matter how much he knocked or pounded on the door, there was no response. He was afraid something had happened to you, so he contacted us. We called you many times but got no answer. We checked the security cameras and didn't see you leaving the residential complex. After calling again with no response, we thought something might have happened, so we reported it to the police." Summer let out a surprised sound and lifted her head to look at her kind-hearted neighbor. So the reason all these people were gathered outside her door was because they thought she had suddenly died inside her apartment. The explanation from the property management and the shocked look on her face made Adrian feel that the entire situation was extremely stupid. He lowered his head to avoid her gaze, straightened up, and walked toward the elevator. "If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first." "Miss you don't look very well. Do you need us to take you to the hospital?" the leading police officer asked with a friendly smile. Summer quickly shook her head. "Oh, no need. I'm fine. Thank you, everyone." But because she shook her head too hard, dizziness suddenly struck her. Her body tilted sideways. Fortunately, the police officer reacted quickly and caught her. Otherwise she would have demonstrated a perfect face-first fall in front of everyone. Phew. That was close. She looked gratefully at the officer who had helped her up. "Are you sure you're okay?" the officer asked, concerned. "I think it would be better if I take you to the hospital for a checkup." The officer was so responsible that he insisted on sending her to the hospital. But Summer absolutely did not want to be taken there in a police car. Holding on to the doorframe, she glanced outside the door. Just then she heard the elevator arriving. Without hesitation, she leaned out from the doorway and called toward the man who was about to step into the elevator. "Hey, new neighbor, wait a moment." She still didn't know his name. Adrian Liu turned his head. He had already roughly guessed what she wanted to say. Looking at her calmly, he spoke briefly. "Go ahead." Summer's voice was weak and hoarse, sounding somewhat pitiful. "Do you have time? Could you take me to the hospital? I really feel embarrassed wasting police resources." So it wasn't embarrassing to trouble him instead. After all, this whole police situation had basically been caused by him. Adrian Liu raised his wrist and glanced at his watch. Then he said to her, "You have 5 minutes." Summer quickly thanked everyone and sent them away. Then she rushed back into the apartment to change clothes and went into the bathroom to wash her face. When she turned on the light and saw her hollow-eyed, pale reflection in the mirror, she nearly jumped in shock. Had she just met all those people looking like this? How horrifying. A fairy could never go outside looking like that. She hurried back to the room, grabbed her makeup bag, and got ready. 8 minutes later, she rushed out and opened the door. The motion sensor light in the hallway wasn't very sensitive. Sometimes opening the door wouldn't trigger it, and only closing it would make the light turn on. The man lazily pressed the elevator button. Tilting his head slightly, he looked at her in the darkness and said coldly, "You're 3 minutes late." "It's freezing." Summer quickly shut the door behind her. With a click, the hallway light came on. Adrian Liu finally saw her face clearly, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. But Summer raised her chin seriously and said, "I have a high fever. Finishing my makeup in just 5 minutes is already a record. Not many girls can do makeup that fast." Was he supposed to praise her for that? The elevator doors opened. Adrian Liu walked straight in, turned around, and pressed the button for the first floor. Then, in an extremely perfunctory tone, he said one sentence, "Impressive." Summer stood beside him in a daze. It took her a moment to realize that he seemed to be mocking her. After putting on makeup, she had completely exhausted her remaining strength, so she didn't bother arguing with him. Adrian Liu lowered his gaze and saw her standing there with her head bowed. She looked like a fragile flower that had wilted under the scorching sun. Now she finally looked like an actual patient. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Do you want to find someone to accompany you?" "Huh. No one can go with me," Summer replied weakly, leaning against the elevator wall. "What about your colleagues or friends?" "My friends and colleagues are busy. Daisy Tang's supervisor took on a contract project. She hasn't contacted me all day today, so she must be extremely busy. Moreover, Tay University was far from here." A week before the holiday, her assistant and colleagues had already made plans for their vacations, so by now they were no longer in the city. Summer Yu suddenly shifted her attention to the man beside her. Just because of a portion of food, he had been willing to call the building management and even the police to help her. Now he had also agreed to take her to the hospital. She whispered softly, "Why don't you finish the good deed and see it through?" After a moment of silence, Adrian Liu finally spoke. "What about your boyfriend?" "No boyfriend." Adrian Liu recalled the scene from last night and asked casually, "Then when you hugged the wrong person last night, you didn't take me for your boyfriend, did you?" The elevator doors opened, and the two of them stepped out one after the other. Just hearing the name of that scumbag Jason Zhou made Summer Yu feel angry again. Her eyes instantly sharpened. "Humph," she snorted coldly. "Wrong. Last night, I took you for my ex-boyfriend." Adrian Liu stopped walking. "When you meet your ex-boyfriend, are you always that enthusiastic? Pouncing over to hug him and smiling so happily?" "Last night, when I hugged the wrong person, we hadn't broken up yet. We only broke up after the hug." Summer Yu truly didn't want to admit that she had been cheated on. It would only make her look like she had terrible judgment in people. Too embarrassing. She raised her head and noticed the doubt in his expression. Indeed, that reason for breaking up sounded far too strange. She stared at his handsome face, thinking carefully for a few seconds. Her not quite clear mind suddenly produced an unbelievable but somehow 90% convincing explanation. If I can randomly hug a passerby who's more handsome than him, why would I still need him? 90% of people in this world loved beauty. Summer Yu felt that the reason she had just given sounded perfectly natural. She even felt like applauding herself. Adrian Liu's expression turned rather subtle. He stared at her cheeks, flushed red from fever, and said slowly, "So you clung to me?" Seeing how serious he seemed, Summer Yu suddenly felt a little uneasy. She lowered her voice. then. Are you still taking me to the hospital? I could take a taxi too. It's not impossible. What's the difference between that and clinging to me? 10 minutes later, Summer Yu stood at the hospital entrance, pulling the hood of her coat over her head as she watched his car casually drive away. Only then did she realize she had forgotten to ask his name. She sighed and dragged her weak, miserable steps into the hospital alone to take a number and register for a consultation. By the time Adrian Liu returned to the company, it was already past 4 in the afternoon. Victor Zhuo took the documents from him and asked, "It only takes half an hour to get from the company to your place. Why did you take nearly 2 hours?" Adrian Liu shot him a glance and blurted out, "Something happened. A traffic accident. You're not hurt, are you?" Victor Zhuo hurriedly looked him up and down. "Are you illiterate or something? Does incident only mean a traffic accident?" Victor Zhuo let out a sigh of relief, ignoring the personal jab, and continued asking, "Then why? Because you're nosy." Adrian Liu felt too embarrassed to mention that ridiculous episode and grew irritated. "Why are you asking so clearly? Do I need to report everything to you?" No need. Victor Zhuo waved his hands quickly. "You should save that treatment for your future girlfriend." He took the documents and walked out of the office, but just as the door closed, it was pushed open again. Adrian Liu looked up and saw Victor Zhuo leaning halfway through the doorway with a wicked grin. "Let me guess, another woman clung to you again, didn't she? Get lost." Adrian Liu said coldly. Victor Zhuo swiftly shut the door. Finally, the office fell silent. Adrian Liu leaned back in his chair and gazed absent-mindedly out the window. He noticed the glass gradually being covered with winding streaks of water. It was raining again. He suddenly remembered that Summer Yu hadn't brought an umbrella. Why was he thinking about her again? Adrian Liu snapped back to his senses and curled his lips in self-mockery. She was just an adult who forgot her umbrella. It wasn't a big deal. Besides, what did that have to do with him anyway? Around 7 in the evening, the project team finally finished the last of their work. Victor Zhuo postponed the celebratory gathering to tomorrow night according to the original plan, letting the employees who had been working overtime for days go home and rest first. When they arrived at the parking lot, Victor Zhuo turned around and asked Adrian Liu, "How's the work on your side? Need my help?" No, last year, the company's project had run into trouble and the capital chain had broken. Adrian Liu had sold his house to fill the gap. Since then, he had been living in a rental. Over the past 2 years, the company had grown steadily. The money had long been recovered. At the beginning of this year, he bought another house, which was currently being renovated, for certain reasons. He could no longer stay at his original rental. Victor Zhuo's aunt happened to have an empty house. She had spent a great deal of effort renovating it. Naturally, Adrian Liu couldn't find anything to complain about. Victor Zhuo's aunt wasn't short of money and cared more about the type of tenant than rent. She would rather leave the house empty than rent it out casually. When she heard that Adrian Liu needed a temporary place to stay, she agreed without hesitation. And just like that, Adrian Liu became Summer Yu's neighbor. Since it was only a temporary place for a few months, there weren't many belongings to arrange. Some boxes of unnecessary items remained unopened. Adrian Liu simply placed them all into the storage cabinet on the balcony. Outside, the rain fell in a fine drizzle. Through the car window, the city at night looked like a hazy oil painting. A girl stood under a roadside tree waiting for the bus. She lowered her head to check her phone, then lifted it again to look around anxiously. The reason Adrian Liu recognized her was because on the hood of her coat hung a soft little fox fur pom-pom. At that moment, the hood was on her head, looking exactly the same as the figure he had seen earlier in the rearview mirror. This afternoon, there were not many girls on the streets dressed like this. Even fewer people were standing outside without umbrellas. Could she not get a taxi? Adrian Liu should have stepped on the gas and driven away. But suddenly, the image from last night flashed through his mind, her throwing her arms around him and looking up with squinted smiling eyes. Then another image followed, her pitiful expression mixed with bold audacity as she asked him to take her to the hospital. The two fragments flickered through his mind. His car slowly came to a stop in front of her. On a rainy day, it was very difficult to catch a taxi. So when the nurse removed the 4-needle, Summer-Yu had already started lining up on a ride-hailing app. When it was finally her turn, she didn't even look at what type of car had accepted the ride. She only noticed the distance, 4.5 kilometers away, and it would take about 8 minutes to arrive. Why is it so far away? She bit her lip, not daring to cancel the ride. All she could do was wait. When she lifted her head again, she discovered a black car stopped right in front of her. The car window slowly rolled down. Instinctively, she glanced over. From her angle, she could only see the lower half of the man's neck. What caught her attention most was the hand resting on the steering wheel, slender, fair. The joints were clearly defined, even the veins on the back of his hand looked strangely attractive. What is this? Did he see that she was bored waiting for a ride and deliberately stop here so she could admire his hand? Summer-Yu stared at the hand for a long time. Finally, when the person inside realized she had absolutely no reaction, he had no choice but to speak. Get in. That voice sounded very pleasant. But who was he telling to get in? Summer-Yu looked around, trying to see which lucky girl had a handsome man personally picking her up. Such beautiful hands. And such a nice voice. His appearance must be just as good. Not pitiful like her, going to the hospital alone, standing in the rain forever without being able to get a ride home. Wait, something wasn't right. Within a radius of 10 meters, she was the only one there. Was this handsome guy talking to her? Hesitating, she stepped down from the hospital entrance steps. Holding the half-lowered car window, she leaned in and peeked inside. Adrian Liu was not wearing a coat. He only had on a black sweater. His appearance was refined and noble. One elbow rested casually against the car door, one hand on the steering wheel. He tilted his head slightly, looking at her calmly. Summer-Yu froze. When she finally came back to her senses, she couldn't hide the surprise on her face. Her bright eyes curved into crescents as she looked at him. Oh, Adrian Liu? You're telling me to get in the car? The tone of that "oh" was exaggerated. Her astonished expression in the rain looked incredibly vivid. Adrian Liu hesitated for a moment. He thought about saying, "I'm passing by and giving you a ride." But somehow, those words suddenly felt heavier, the feeling of being awaited. And giving someone an unexpected surprise diluted his earlier indifference. The sensation was a little strange. His throat moved slightly, and he let out a low sound. Oh. So the lucky girl is actually me? Summer-Yu murmured happily and opened the car door. Adrian Liu didn't hear clearly. Seeing her sit down, he reached for the coat on the passenger seat to toss it into the back. But halfway through the motion, it got stuck. One sleeve was trapped, because Summer-Yu had already sat on it. Huh? What's this? Summer-Yu also noticed. She looked down. Very naturally, she lifted herself slightly and reached out to pull his coat free. Let me get it for you. Adrian Liu wanted to say it wasn't necessary, but before he could, Summer-Yu had already placed the coat on her lap. Forget it, seatbelt. Okay. Summer-Yu obediently fastened her seatbelt. The car slowly began moving forward. That afternoon she had been running a high fever. The moment she got into the car, dizziness washed over her again. She closed her eyes to rest. She didn't notice at all what brand his car was. Whether a car was expensive or not could often be felt from the interior. She glanced around briefly. It was obvious. This car was very expensive. At first, she thought Adrian Liu was just an ordinary tenant renting a place. But it seemed that wasn't the case. Her current appearance was completely different from earlier that afternoon. Adrian Liu drove while asking casually, "Has your fever gone down?" It started going down halfway through the 4. When someone's fever breaks, their energy returns almost immediately. Summer Yu stretched her left hand toward him. "They gave me 3-4 bottles. Look, my hand is all swollen." Her slender white fingers passed briefly before Adrian Liu's eyes. He lowered his gaze to look. But before he could see clearly, she had already pulled her hand back. His lips pressed together slightly. He said nothing. The car suddenly became quiet. Summer Yu looked out the window for a while, unable to bear the silence. She turned back toward him. "Aren't you curious how I know your name?" "You asked the property management." Adrian Liu replied indifferently. You guessed it exactly." Outside the window, the rain continued falling in a fine drizzle. Just looking at it made one feel cold. The man beside her also seemed rather cold, silent and reserved. Summer Yu pouted slightly. Suddenly, she caught a faint scent of wood. She found another topic. "The car fragrance smells really nice." "What scent is it?" As she spoke, she glanced toward the dashboard. Car perfumes were usually placed around there, but the dashboard was empty. Adrian Liu kept his eyes on the road. "There's no car fragrance in the car." "But I clearly smelled something." Summer Yu sounded very certain. Without thinking, she pulled his coat closer and used it as a pillow. Holding it with both hands, she tucked it beneath her chin. The wooden scent grew stronger. It was the kind of scent that became more pleasant the more you smelled it. "If I ever buy a car, I'll definitely get this kind of fragrance." Adrian Liu tightened his grip on the steering wheel and took a slow breath. Then he calmly told her, "If you move my coat to the back seat, you won't smell it anymore." Summer Yu froze. After a moment, she lowered her head and looked at the men's coat in her arms. Only then did Summer Yu belatedly realize that the woody scent was coming from his coat, men's perfume. A woody fragrance. Taking his coat for him had originally been an unconscious action, but now she suddenly felt a little embarrassed, especially since the woody scent was still lingering at the tip of her nose. Summer Yu had once gone with colleagues to choose perfume for a boyfriend before. She knew that some men's fragrances were extremely light, and you had to be very close to smell them. The fact that a fragrance could only be smelled at such close distance already carried a somewhat ambiguous implication. Just now, she must have still been suffering from the after effects of her high fever. Her mind hadn't been completely clear, which was why she had been so eager to help him retrieve his coat. But now, if she deliberately moved the coat to the back seat, it would feel a bit too intentional. Summer Yu could only sit up awkwardly, keeping her nose away from the coat. She raised a hand and brushed her hair, pretending to remain calm. "It smells really nice. Very tasteful. You still haven't told me what perfume it is. When I get a boyfriend next time, I'll buy this one as a gift for him." This was someone who had just broken up last night, yet she was already thinking about what gift to give her next boyfriend. Adrian Liu was speechless. Calmly, he turned the steering wheel and drove into the intersection leading into their residential complex. In an emotionless tone, he said, "I forgot. Wait until you find your next boyfriend, then I'll tell you." How unreasonable. She had only asked the name of the perfume. Did she really need to find a boyfriend first just to get an answer? Summer Yu couldn't help turning her head to look at him, trying to read from his expression whether he was joking. Adrian Lu looked straight ahead. The side profile of his face was exceptionally handsome. His jawline was firm and smooth, giving him the aura of a male protagonist from a comic book. Adrian Lu was the most romantically striking man she had ever met in real life. Moreover, he kept his hair black and wore no makeup, something quite rare. The only problem was that he was too cold. He looked like the type of person who understood nothing about romance. When the car drove into the residential complex, she declared firmly, "You definitely don't have a girlfriend." Adrian Lu didn't reply. He remained silent. Having a car was indeed convenient. They drove directly into the parking garage. The rain couldn't touch their faces, and the sun couldn't reach their heads. From the garage, they could take the elevator straight upstairs. Summer Yu couldn't help sighing inwardly at how convenient it was. Then she said sincerely to Adrian Lu, "Thank you for today." Adrian Lu didn't respond with even a simple acknowledgement. He only curved his lips slightly. Although being mistaken by a crowd of people as someone who had suddenly died inside his own apartment had been somewhat embarrassing, the feeling of someone caring about you was actually quite nice. And she had even ridden in his car twice. Summer Yu thought about it, then lifted her head and smiled at him. "Are you free tomorrow night? I'll treat you to dinner." Adrian Lu lowered his eyes to look at her. "Tomorrow night the company is having a gathering." She immediately corrected herself. "Then how about the day after tomorrow? Near our complex there's a hot pot restaurant that's really delicious. Can you eat hot pot?" Adrian Lu tilted his head and glanced at her. Maybe not. Next to the hot pot place there's also a Thai restaurant that's really good." Adrian Lu didn't like hot pot, and he liked Thai food even less. The sour and sweet flavors. He had originally planned to refuse. But when he looked into her bright, expectant eyes, he paused for 2 seconds, as if possessed by some strange impulse. He nodded, "Okay." Summer Yu immediately showed an expression of someone who was very good at seizing opportunities. She took her phone out of her coat pocket, opened her WeChat QR code, and held it up in front of him. "Let's add each other on WeChat so it'll be easier to stay in touch." She blinked at him, signaling for him to scan it. Under her gaze, Adrian Lu reluctantly took out his phone and scanned the code to add her. This was the first time he had ever scanned a girl's WeChat QR code. When the elevator arrived, Summer Yu stepped out while contentedly looking at their newly opened chat window. Without hesitation, she sent him a waving cat emoji. Then she edited the contact remark for him. Adrian Lu glanced over and discovered that the remark was not his name. Instead, it read 5 characters, "Good Chinese neighbor." Adrian Lu couldn't help himself. He took her phone and quickly deleted those 5 characters, replacing them with Adrian Lu. Without saying a word, his face expressionless, he handed the phone back to her. Summer Yu accepted it with a guilty look and explained, "I didn't know how to write your name." After a pause, she added, "But now I know." Adrian Lu clearly didn't believe her nonsense. Summer Yu coughed lightly, then, "See you tomorrow." The two parted at their respective doors and returned to their own apartments. Adrian Lu went into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. WeChat notifications chimed several times. When he tapped on it, it turned out to be messages from the technical team group chat. After glancing at them briefly, he exited. Below the technical team group was Summer Yu's profile picture. Her WeChat name was Living in Summer. There was one unread message, the emoji she had sent earlier. Her profile picture was a chibi drawing of a little girl holding a bouquet of sunflowers, smiling brightly. If you looked closely, you could even see a tiny grain of rice stuck at the corner of her mouth. This drawing was probably meant to represent herself. He tapped on the chat box. After hesitating for a moment, he clicked on her Moments page. There he discovered she had posted something a little over an hour ago. The content read, "Always remember to bring in the food hanging outside your door. And don't wear earplugs for too long when sleeping. Otherwise your neighbors might think you suddenly died in your apartment. When you wake up, you'll discover the property management, security guards, and even the police uncle gathered outside your door, discussing whether to break it open." Attached was an emoji that said, "I'm really grateful." Adrian Liu tapped on the comments section. He could only see 2 of her replies. It's okay, just a fever. Dear fellow artists, please remember to rest more. Stay up late less and sleep more. The most important thing is to protect the life of a comic artist. Scrolling down a few more lines, Adrian Liu learned something new. Summer Yu was a comic artist, and she had just celebrated the 2-day anniversary of her work's publication. People who loved posting status updates and those who didn't were very different kinds of people. From Summer Yu's WeChat, Adrian Liu could easily figure out her profession, her hobbies, and even her circle of friends. Meanwhile, Summer Yu stared at Adrian Liu's completely empty WeChat profile and suddenly felt like she had gotten the short end of the deal. With a sigh of regret, she exited his chat window. Then she noticed that he had liked the post she made earlier that afternoon while she was bored during her 4 treatment. Someone who never posted status updates liking someone else's post. How ironic. Summer Yu pretended not to notice. She took the opportunity to shower, washed up thoroughly, and climbed into bed to sleep. The next morning, the first thing she did after waking up was go to the door to retrieve her food. The door opened just a crack. She reached out with precision, grabbed the takeout bag hanging outside the door, and then shut the door again. The entire process took no more than a second. Just as Adrian Liu finished his morning run and stepped out of the elevator, he saw this exact scene. Click. The door had already closed. Then it opened again, and Summer Yu poked her head out. Her eyes met Adrian Liu's. "Good morning." Just before she had closed the door earlier, she seemed to have heard a faint ding. Adrian Liu glanced at her. "Good morning." Summer Yu smiled at him. Then she slammed the door shut again. Adrian Liu stared at the closed door and frowned. He had a feeling she hadn't really come out just to greet him. It felt more like she had deliberately let him see her, as if to say, "Look, I'm still alive." After finishing breakfast, Summer Yu noticed that the rain outside had stopped. She originally planned to go downstairs for a walk. But the moment she opened the window, a gust of cold wind rushed in, making her sneeze. And Adrian Liu went running in this kind of weather. She closed the window again. Without hesitation, she flopped back onto her bed and started scrolling through Weibo, checking the comments and messages from her fans. Her Weibo account had 200,000 followers. Among them were quite a few fellow artists. In her spare time, she liked drawing daily life comics and imaginative comic strips. Occasionally, she would also grit her teeth and draw fan comics. Her fans' comments appeared one after another. "Madam, I'm starving. Aren't you eating? Why didn't you post any food during the holiday? We've been waiting for so long already." "I know. Madam must be working hard stockpiling drafts. Anyway, the break is only a month. I can still read the continuation of the previous series, right? Even if there isn't one, it's fine. A new story works too. I won't rush you. I'm sure I can wait." San Xia was her pen name. According to what her mother had told her, the day she was born happened to be the hottest day of the year, so her name had been chosen quite randomly to match the circumstances. Not many people liked the scorching heat of summer. But Summer-Yu loved it very much. In fact, she wished there were 3 summers in a single year. What should I draw? She scratched her head. Before the fever yesterday, she had already come up with an idea. But after one night of burning with fever, she had completely forgotten it. She tried hard to remember, but the more she tried, the more her head hurt, and she still couldn't recall it. Instead, she suddenly remembered something else. Jason Zhou also followed her on Weibo, and she had forgotten to block him. She quickly found his account and added it to her blacklist. The moment she finished doing that, inspiration suddenly flashed through her mind. Wasn't the ridiculous incident from 2 days ago a perfect source of material? By the time Daisy Tang called her, Summer-Yu was already almost finished drawing. She answered the phone, turned on speaker mode, and continued staring at the screen of her iPad. "Sweetheart, I've just gotten off the subway," Daisy Tang said cheerfully. "Hurry up and change your clothes and put on some makeup. Let's go have lunch and then go shopping." Summer-Yu immediately lifted her head. "Huh? What? What did you say?" Daisy Tang sounded in an excellent mood. "Didn't I tell you 2 days ago that I'd come visit you while I had time?" "Oh no. Oh no." She had completely forgotten about it. From Daisy Tang's university to this place, she had to take a bus first and then transfer to the subway. Altogether, the journey took nearly 2 hours. Daisy Tang often said she would come visit her, but out of 5 times, at least 3 times she would end up canceling. So when Daisy Tang had said 2 days ago that she was free and would come see her, Summer-Yu hadn't paid much attention. Summer-Yu stammered, "I had a fever yesterday, so I forgot." "You had a fever?" Daisy Tang had been extremely busy lately and rarely went online. She hadn't even seen Summer-Yu's post yesterday. "Then let's not go shopping. We'll just eat at the Thai restaurant near your complex." "Okay. After that we can go back to your place and chat." Summer-Yu froze. Last night, she had already promised to treat Adrian Lu to lunch. Now Daisy Tang had come all this way to see her and wanted to eat too. Daisy Tang had traveled nearly 2 hours to get here. There was no way she could just abandon her. But when she thought about Adrian Lu's cold expression, she couldn't bring herself to say they should postpone the meal. For a moment, she felt like a two-timing scumbag, wavering back and forth. Couldn't she just eat with both of them? At the same time, after struggling with herself for half a minute, she decided to ask Adrian Lu for his opinion. Surely Daisy Tang wouldn't mind. Adrian Lu took a white coat out of his wardrobe. His movement paused for a moment. Then he put it back and replaced it with a black coat instead. Carrying the coat, he walked out of the room. He picked up his phone from the coffee table and checked the time. It was already 12 o'clock. She had said the restaurant was near the residential complex, but it still took more than 10 minutes to walk there. Ordering and waiting for the food would take at least half an hour. He wondered what time the lunch that the girl next door had mentioned would actually be. Just as he was thinking about it, someone knocked on the door, right on time. He curved his lips slightly, put on his coat, and walked toward the door. Outside, Summer-Yu vaguely heard the sound of approaching footsteps. She took a deep breath. The door opened. She immediately smiled at the well-dressed man standing in the doorway. "Actually, I want to ask you a question." Adrian Lu tilted his chin slightly, signaling for her to continue. "My best friend came to visit me. She's almost here. I just wanted to ask, would you mind if the 3 of us went out to eat together?" Summer-Yu cautiously tested the waters. She saw Adrian Lu narrow his eyes slightly, his expression clearly displeased. So she hurried to add a few explanations. "My best friend is a graduate student at T University. She's beautiful and very good at conversation. She definitely won't. The more she talked, the more familiar it sounded. It was exactly the kind of tone relatives and friends used when they were trying to introduce a girlfriend to someone. Adrian Liu finally had to interrupt her. What Summer Yu wants to say is that it definitely won't be boring. After being cut off, Summer Yu already had her own guess. A trace of disappointment appeared on her face as she sighed softly. You don't want to go? Now it sounded even more like it. Adrian Liu stared at her and asked bluntly, "Are you trying to introduce me to a girlfriend?" Summer Yu was stunned. She had no idea why he would think that. Almost instinctively, she refuted him. How could that be? If something like that were happening, I'd definitely do it myself. Combined with what she had said the night before, the sentence basically meant, I've already got my eye on you. Adrian Liu truly didn't know what to say. Should he expose the logical chain behind her view of love? Or just directly tell her that the two of them were impossible? The moment the words left her mouth, Summer Yu felt both embarrassed and shocked. She couldn't understand why she had said something like that. Could it be that I was really bewitched by his looks? For a brief moment, the atmosphere fell into an awkward silence. Adrian Liu snorted softly. You set your goal pretty quickly. Summer Yu met Daisy Tang at the entrance of the residential complex. Daisy Tang stood in front of her, looking left and right. Didn't you say someone else was going to eat with us? Where is he? Not coming anymore. He said. Summer Yu mimicked Adrian Liu's tone. You and I aren't close enough yet for me to go eat with your best friend. Daisy Tang clicked her tongue. Is that so? Who is he? My new neighbor. That day I was too busy telling you about Jason Zhou cheating that I forgot to mention it. Summer Yu linked arms with Daisy Tang as they walked toward the restaurant, recounting the story of accidentally hugging the wrong person that day. Daisy Tang's first reaction was immediate. Is he handsome? Extremely handsome. Summer Yu suddenly stopped walking and said very seriously, he's more handsome than every boyfriend I've ever had. You've only dated 2 people. Don't make it sound like you've dated dozens. Daisy Tang knew Summer Yu's love history very well. Her first relationship was in high school. They got into universities in different cities. Long-distance relationships rarely lasted, and theirs ended after just 1 year. Her second relationship was with Jason Zhou. They had broken up only a few days ago. They had been together for less than half a year. That's not the important part. At this moment, Daisy Tang felt like a comic reader who had only read the first 3 chapters, while Summer Yu had already reached chapter 10. She was eager to discuss the upcoming plot. After explaining everything that had happened over the past 2 days, the two of them had already taken seats inside the restaurant. After listening, Daisy Tang looked at her thoughtfully. He's really that handsome? Summer Yu looked extremely dissatisfied. You're actually doubting my aesthetic judgment? Of course, Daisy Tang trusted the aesthetic sense of a comic artist who cared deeply about appearances. Still, she couldn't help rolling her eyes. If not, you wouldn't have said something like, if something like that happens, I'll definitely do it myself. Summer Yu had no way to refute that, but it still made no sense. Why would she say something like that to a strange man? She covered her face with her hands, looking troubled. Tell me, why did I say that? Daisy Tang answered confidently, because you've got your eye on him. Just because of his looks? Although Adrian Liu's appearance perfectly matched her aesthetic taste. They had only known each other for 3 days. They weren't even close yet. Besides, she had just broken up. Some people might fall in love at first sight, but could anyone fall in love within 3 days? Maybe some people could, but definitely not her. Summer Yu thought about it seriously. She felt that she simply admired his appearance. She didn't have any desire to possess him. She slowly shook her head. No. I don't want to date him. Daisy Tang stopped flipping through the menu and looked up at her. Then she said something shocking. Then treat him as a backup tire. When you start feeling something and want to date him, just go for it. I wouldn't. Summer, you refuse to admit it. Treating someone like Adrian Liu as a backup option would practically be a sin. Daisy Tang didn't believe her. She raised an eyebrow. Then find a chance to introduce him to me? Summer, you knew she was asking on purpose. Daisy Tang had secretly been in love with a senior for several years but still didn't dare confess. Summer, you smiled. You'd better confess to your senior first. Only after the two of them finished teasing and attacking each other did they finally start ordering food. Daisy Tang rarely came here, so after eating, Summer, you still dragged her weak body around shopping with her for the entire afternoon. In the evening, they even had dinner outside again. The consequence of sacrificing herself to accompany a friend was that once she got home, she collapsed onto her bed and couldn't get up until nearly noon the next day. She ordered a cup of coffee and a portion of eel rice, solving both breakfast and lunch in one go. While eating, she suddenly thought about Adrian Liu again. I wonder if he's free tonight. Yesterday she had been choked speechless by his rejection and forgot to ask. Summer. You opened WeChat and searched for his profile picture. Adrian Liu's WeChat name was very simple, just the first letter of his surname. His profile picture was just as simple, the character Liu written with a fountain pen on a sheet of white paper. Among Summer Yu's colorful and lively list of contacts, this kind of perfunctory profile picture actually stood out instead. She went straight to the point. Are you free tonight? Her neighbor replied faster than she expected. Maybe. It depends. It was probably because he wasn't satisfied that she hadn't used his name. Summer Yu smiled obediently and typed again. Adrian Liu, are you free tonight? I'd like to treat you to dinner. How about tomorrow night? Not so cold after all. What nonsense about keeping a backup for dating. Even if he agreed, she would still need to think about it. Biting her spoon, Summer Yu expressionlessly typed quickly. Since when did WeChat get an auto-reply function? Other than maybe, do you know any other words? Before she could send it, another message suddenly appeared in the chat window. It was a 4-second voice message. She paused and opened the voice message first. A man's deep, magnetic voice came through the phone. His tone even carried the faintest trace of gentleness. He said, I'm going on a business trip tomorrow. I'll be back next week. So it turned out he simply didn't have time. She had misunderstood him. Summer Yu set down her spoon, the corners of her lips curving slightly as she prepared to delete the message she had just typed. However, when she was drawing, she had a habit of curling her little finger. Before her index finger could even touch the delete button, her little finger had already tapped send. She froze for a moment, then hurriedly pressed recall message. Adrian Liu and Victor Zhua had arranged to have dinner with a client. Adrian Liu was sitting in the driver's seat. The engine was already running. Just as he was about to drive off, her message arrived. After sending the voice message, he had been about to put down his phone when he saw the words the other party is typing appear at the top of the chat window, so he waited for a moment. Victor Zhua, sitting in the passenger seat, heard that sentence and glanced at Adrian Liu's phone in surprise. He couldn't see the words clearly, but he could see the profile picture. Such a cute profile picture. Obviously a girl, always curious about gossip. He asked, who are you reporting your schedule to? That doesn't count as reporting my schedule. Adrian Liu had just finished speaking when another message appeared in the chat window. 3 seconds later, it was withdrawn. Too late. He had already seen it. Other than maybe, do you know any other words? Victor Joie saw the message flash briefly on the screen before disappearing. She was quick. Adrian Lu chuckled softly. He had seen it anyway, since it had already been seen. Summer Yu responded generously. Next time I'll try to be 1 second faster. She wasn't pretending at all. Adrian Lu laughed, set his phone aside, and drove the car out. You're even laughing now? Victor Joie's intuition told him that something must be going on. Unable to hold back, he said, "Come on, say it. Keeping everything bottled up will suffocate you." Adrian Lu looked ahead calmly and replied with a smile. What could I possibly have going on? Victor Joie noticed Adrian Lu's phone screen light up again and instinctively glanced over. He guessed it was the girl who had hugged him by mistake last time, then somehow started clinging to him. And sure enough, he guessed right. Actually, Adrian Lu himself didn't know whether Summer Yu was clinging to him or not. Although yesterday she hadn't denied liking him, he hadn't seen much affection for him in her eyes. Looking straight ahead, he said casually, "She's just my new neighbor." A female neighbor? Victor Joie immediately thought of the reason Adrian Lu had moved. Adrian Lu gave a soft Victor Joie couldn't believe it. So you're reporting your schedule to her now? The previous landlord of Adrian Lu's apartment had insisted on introducing her niece to him. She said her niece had just returned from studying abroad, was very beautiful, and was perfectly suited for him. Adrian Lu had refused several times. With no other option, the landlord had actually brought her niece downstairs to block him in person. The niece had fallen in love with Adrian Lu at first sight. Even though he rejected her bluntly, she kept pestering him relentlessly. Victor Joie had known Adrian Lu for many years and had seen plenty of girls chase after him, but someone as openly aggressive as the landlord's niece was the first. She had even said that unless Adrian Lu slept with her once, she would continue harassing him. Later, the landlord's conscience finally kicked in. She informed the girl's parents, who stepped in to resolve the situation. Only after Adrian Lu moved away did the whole thing finally end. During that period of harassment, Victor Joie had felt that Adrian Lu was about to develop psychological trauma. And now, unexpectedly, he had gotten entangled with a new neighbor again. I said it's not reporting my schedule. The moment Adrian Lu heard that, he knew Victor Joie had misunderstood. After a few seconds of silence, he briefly explained everything that had happened over the past few days. Victor Joie was stunned after hearing it. After thinking for a moment, he said carefully, "So you were the one who provoked her first?" Then he shook his head. "No, that's not quite right. It's more like your own initiative and boredom created this situation." Adrian Lu fell silent. He couldn't refute that. Victor Joie became extremely curious about this female neighbor and immediately started making plans. "When you get back from your business trip, I'll find a time to gather everyone and celebrate your housewarming." Adrian Lu rejected him coldly. "No need. Thanks." On the other side, after finishing her eel rice, Summer Yu finally received Adrian Lu's reply. It was just one word. She responded with an emoji, then walked into her study, picked up her iPad, and continued drawing her comic. That night, she even updated the first chapter. Coincidentally, the story had reached the scene where the two characters met in the elevator. The comments section immediately became lively. Some readers urged her to update faster, others began guessing the plot. Did she hug the wrong boyfriend? I love this kind of storyline. Kya. I love it so much. What happens next? What happens next? Hurry and update. Don't make me kneel down and beg you. Wife, I want to read the next chapter. Why did the male lead appear in the elevator? Let me guess. Could it be that the female lead brings him home to get revenge on her ex-boyfriend? Bring him home to do that and that, right? I love this kind of adult content. I have a bold idea. Bring him home to do that and that. What bold idea are you talking about that you can't even say it out loud? Fans of 2D stories were extremely clever and had boundless imaginations. There was nothing they couldn't come up with. Reading the comments, Summer Yu's face flushed bright red and her heart started beating faster. Originally, there was nothing inappropriate about it. The problem was that this story was based on a real-life prototype. As she read their comments, Adrian Lu's body and face automatically appeared in her mind. It felt as if she were secretly fantasizing about him. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. She quickly exited the comments section and decided to pretend she hadn't seen any of it. She needed to hurry and update the next chapter. In the story, the misunderstanding caused by a portion of food would push the plot into a dramatic direction. The direction of the upcoming comments would definitely change. While drawing the comic, Summer Yu chatted in the work group. The colorist mentioned her in the group and asked whether she needed help with coloring. In reality, the colorist simply wanted to preview the storyline. Suddenly, the editor responsible for the project spoke up in the private work group. Having fun, huh? At Summer Yu, have you saved up your drafts yet? Summer Yu was horrified. Don't start with such a terrifying question the moment you appear. The colorist immediately said, "This is too scary. I'm leaving first." The editor laughed and then threw a screenshot into the chat. It was the vow Summer Yu had made in the group during the holiday. This month I will definitely repent and correct my bad habits. Sleep early, wake up early, exercise 3 times a week, and draw 3 chapters. If I fail, I'll change my name to 3 Winters. Recently, she really had been going to bed very early, but she hadn't been waking up early, so basically, she ended up combining breakfast and lunch into a single meal. As for exercising 3 times a week, that was even more impossible. After her recent high fever, she constantly felt chilled and didn't even want to leave the house. And regarding those saved draft chapters, she hadn't even started. Feeling dizzy, Summer Yu rubbed her face and weakly defended herself. It's only been a little over a week. I can still save this. Having a private life was great, but she couldn't keep going like this. If the deadline arrived and she had nothing to post, she would be dead. By the time Summer Yu finished drawing the last panel of chapter 2, it was already completely dark outside. She set down her drawing tablet, stood up, and stretched. Then she decided to go out and get dinner. She ate a simple dinner at a small noodle shop near her residential complex. Then took a walk to the nearby supermarket. She grabbed 2 cups of yogurt and walked toward the checkout counter. As she passed the seafood section, she suddenly stopped and turned her head. A familiar figure stood there. The man was wearing a black suit today, which made his tall figure appear even more striking. Summer Yu had never seen Adrian Lu wearing a suit before, so she didn't dare to be certain. She hesitated for a moment before walking closer. Then she secretly lifted her head for a quick glance. If I got the wrong person, I'll run immediately. She glanced at the uncle who was cleaning fish at the counter, then casually lifted her head as if nothing was wrong. The moment her eyes rose, they met his deep, dark gaze. Perhaps it was because Adrian Lu's aura in a suit looked so cold and noble that when their eyes met, Summer Yu's heart suddenly skipped a beat. For a moment, she even forgot how to speak. Adrian Lu didn't say anything either. He looked at her for a few seconds, then calmly shifted his gaze away as if he didn't know her at all. Summer Yu realized she had already become somewhat accustomed to his cold attitude. Naturally, she stepped closer to him. When did you come back? Last night. Summer Yu was surprised. Then why didn't you tell me? You promised that when you got back, would treat you to dinner. She was wearing contact lenses. Under the bright lights, her amber-colored eyes sparkled, every emotion inside them clear and unrestrained. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.